こんにちは、ハリケーンフットボールです。今回の教材は、サッカー日本代表に関する動画です。サムライブルーは、ワールドカップアジア最終予選で、今夜オーストラリア代表と戦います。日本代表はすでにワールドカップ出場を決め、招集メンバーも大幅に変更し、フォーメンションや新しいメンバーをチャレンジすることが主な目的になりそうです。今回は、オーストラリア人のチャンネルで、この試合のプレビュー動画で、日本代表の大幅に変わりすぎたメンバーに笑ってしまうようなリアクションをし、それでも強いことが分かっているために、勝てる可能性を信じている、といった話をしています。実際にどのように話しているのか、チェックしてみましょ
う。The Socceroos are taking on Japan in Perth in what could be the match that qualifies Australia for another FIFA Men's World Cup. It could be a historic occasion, and of course we're taking on a Japan team that has already qualified. Hajime Moriyasu has selected his team, which looks a little bit different to the last one that secured qualification for Japan. I'm joined by Matt Olson and Jacob Stevens today to take you through our little piece of opposition analysis. Matt, lead us through the squad, because as we anticipated when we talked about national teams last time around a few months ago, this is a different Japanese team to the one that we have seen before.
Yeah, look, obviously, I think people might want to downplay the effects of this and say, Japan are a really, really strong team coming in, which they are. Ultimately, you've still got a midfield core of Endo, Kubo, Daichi Kamada. These guys that are experienced in Europe, and ultimately, yeah, they'll have an upper hand in some ways. But it's more the depth and really just the output that Moriyasu is going to want that's really going to shape up differently. The amount of zeros on the board in terms of caps earned for these players, I've only ever seen something like this once, and it was for Tunisia going into the 2018 World Cup. For whatever reason, Tunisia sent a really inexperienced squad to the 2018 World Cup to face Belgium and England, and I recall that ended exactly how we all thought it would. I think the biggest overarching element here is just because those zeros are on the board, I just don't think that we should sit here and talk about it being a cakewalk or anything, or talk about, the streak ending, 16 years in. I think just remember that they are Japanese players, but I think also remember there's something that's, funnily enough, I didn't think I'd be mentioning this soon, but the head of the Japanese SBS lives in Perth. He goes to a lot of Glory games, and I've become good friends with Mr. Yasu Imanawari. And the one thing he said to me is probably expect Moriyasu to rotate when they come to WA. But there's one thing about East Asian culture that everyone knows, is that there is discipline to the very core of who you are, and it's almost to like a military style when it comes to sport. Like, there is a reason why you get exempt from military service in South Korea for winning gold medals in sport and winning football tournaments, right? It's because you have that military style and the camaraderie, but the seriousness to it, right? You stick by your teammates no matter what. And these Japanese players, especially those senior guys, they're going to want to stick to their less senior teammates more than anything. And that bond is something that I think just really sticks with me, and the way Yasu described it, because ultimately, like, I can't really say with full certainty that this Japanese team will be any different. All I know is that working out the combinations will be a difficulty. So it's a matter of how Moriyasu and some of those players coming out of, the Belgian league, the J League itself, how those guys adapt, that will ultimately see Japan succeed or fail in the next window.
Jacob, it's something that we said on the main Ramble Australia pod during the last window, is that looking at this Japanese squad, and maybe they do rotate, and the 23 or 26, whatever it is that come, may look a little bit different. But when you get 11 players on the field from the nation that has clearly been the premier team in Asia for the last little while, they're going to be a very tough football team to beat. And we know the battles that we've had with them over the years.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of touching on a little bit of what Matt said there, you look at, even though a lot of these players don't have any international caps, and I'm looking at the forward line in particular, I think there's all of about, 10 caps between them, so it's going to make for interesting combinations up front, but they're all coming from, good pedigree, good clubs, good competitions, and playing at high levels in Asia, some of them at some of those sort of secondary competitions in Europe, and when we're looking at the Socceroos, that's exactly what we're getting there as well. So it's not their full strength starting 11. They don't need don't need them, right? Like they can afford to rest some key players. They can afford to try out some newbies and see what they've got. But it's still going to be an immensely difficult task for Australia to get past, both for the way that they're going to look to play and sort of that mentality that they have that Matt said, but also the fact that these players, they are coming from a decent level in the first place. It's not like they're drawing upon, semi-professional or amateur players or anything like that, right? Like these are still highly professional players playing at good levels. So no, it's going to be interesting to see how Moriyasu decides to actually send his team out there and the way they're going to look to play, because we've seen a lot of very similar stuff, especially in the last couple of windows from his sides. But with a useful team and a rather inexperienced team, it might be a case of just really working and focusing on those basics and making sure they don't make mistakes and going to that discipline that Matt's kind of spoke of there.
You brought up a few names, Matt, of the players that are still in the squad, and we're looking to probably start against Australia as well. Who are some of those players that people might be aware of that are missing out on this?
I think that an obvious one would probably be Minamino's not been selected. You're already kind of... I've gone that in depth with who's in the squad. I've not thought for a second who's out of it.
He's out.
Yes, Mitoma, thank you. The Celtic boys. Rio Hatade, although he's only had 11 caps. How many caps? Because I know he was a big part. He was captain of the Olympic team, Dyson Maida. And Furuhashi.
He won player of the season, I think.
Yes. Furuhashi and Moriyasu had a very, very well-known split. Moriyasu basically came out and was like, Kyogo's not good enough to play for the national team. And he was pretty upset about it. Asano's also 53 caps playing in Spain. Yeah, you mentioned Mitoma with Brighton. Ritsu Doan, another very obvious one. He was such a star player at the World Cup. For someone who's only 26 years of age, unless he's injured, which I'm pretty certain he's not, that is bizarre. Because at least with someone like Minamino, he's in his 30s, right? I mean, why is Ritsu Doan not in a Japanese squad? It makes no sense at all. So, yeah. But that being said, on the concept of age and experience, what I do also find interesting about it is, Jacob, you mentioned that the forward line. Yeah, okay, on national team experience, these guys aren't all that, but I mean, you've got someone like Machino who's been well established in the German leagues. He's also 25 years old. We're not talking about a spring chicken. We're just talking about someone that, because of squad depth, has not been able to crack it into the national team. So on quality, that's a totally different conversation. It just is.
Jacob, take us back to the last game. Obviously, Australia, a famous, really, 1-1 draw against Japan. In Japan, it's not often that Australian national teams go over there and earn results. It was a scrappy game in the end, own goals either way that decided it. But especially early in the Tony Popovich reign, it was kind of almost a flagship result that just turned the mentality of things a little bit. What are we likely to see from Japan in a football perspective, and how might Popovich adjust slightly to what he's already seen?
Well, it was an interesting result, I believe. I'm not 100% certain on this, but I think I read somewhere it's the only time in World Cup qualification history that a 1-1 draw has ended with both goals being own goals. So a little slice of history there.
Yeah.
But it was one of those games where, honestly, Japan absolutely dominated in most facets of the game that you expect when you talk about domination. They had, a decent chunk of possession. They were the most threatening team throughout most of the game. And what they really did was, we know they like to play with this back three with wing backs. And what they did was play really aggressively high and wide with those two wing backs, and really putting the pressure on the similar setup that Australia had, and trying to spread that defensive line as wide as possible, and then using their pace and direct football to get in behind. And it was causing a lot of problems for the Socceroos. And then at the other end of the pitch, in the back half, what they did was just absolutely strangle any opportunities that Australia managed to do when they got the ball into that final third. It was immediate hard pressing, proper good defending, no passive sitting back, anything like that. They knew that if they gave Australia an inch, then Australia were probably going to take the chance, and we saw it when Lewis Miller was given that space to whip that ball in, and all of a sudden it causes a problem. So look, I think that the general idea will still be pervasive in this fixture, even though the squad is going to be different. I think they're still going to look to play high and wide and still try and drag Australia a little bit out of shape defensively. But it's just going to be about how they do that. It might be slightly different. Whether they slow it down or speed it up, I'm not quite sure. I'm leaning towards the latter. I think they might try and play a little bit quicker than they did in that first one, just simply of virtue of the fact that they know that Australia are going to really be chasing a result in this one. So the space might open up and they're going to need to capitalise on that a little bit quicker. In terms of then what Popovic does to counter that, there's a number of things. I think the midfield was quite weak in that one. Obviously, it had Luke Bratton starting alongside Jackson Irvine as sort of the double pivot, which, look, in terms of the general quality of footballers, they're probably not a match for Morita and Tanaka, who Japan started. So, that was always going to be difficult off the bat. And I think that's kind of where, Australia lost a lot of the possession battle, was in that midfield area. So I think, obviously we don't quite know what the squad's going to look like yet, but hopefully with a few more options to play in the midfield, he can sort of figure out what's going to be the best. Is it going to be two more sort of slightly deeper holding midfielders? Is it going to be somebody who maybe has sort of that progressive passing range that Bratton and Irvine don't have? I'm not quite sure. We'll have to wait and see for the squad for that, but I think he's going to at least have some options this time to be able to change things up, to try and get a bit of a stakehold back in that middle third, because that's really where Australia struggled. There was, a lot of really good solid defending, obviously limited the chances that Japan could create, but it was then transitioning that into attack where they struggled, and they were turning the ball over frequently in the middle of the park. So I think Popovic is going to have to focus on that area first and then sort of build from there.
All right, Matt, I'm going to have to ask you a favour. You're going to have to take your AFC hat off, and your Australian cork hat is firmly positioned on the top of your head. Socceroos, this game is going to be playing in Perth. You're going to be at the stadium, potentially to qualify for a World Cup. How do you see this game playing out?
So something I've kind of had in the back of my mind is there's an inherent fear with Japan, and that's obvious, right? But what I'm also thinking of from the Popovic perspective is there actually is a canvas for how to beat Japan. And we know this because are they the champions of Asia right now?
No.
And looking, I just, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, if we find a way to replicate, and obviously, look, our strengths, Iraq's strengths are very different, but if we find a way to replicate the Iraq, exploitation of a Japanese system, knowing full well that the 11 that was in that game is actually far stronger than the 11 that is going to be lining up for Japan, that for me actually excites me a little bit. I'll also come to two other sentiments that are very important. In the way that victory was exploited by Jesus Casas at the time, could we get someone, and I'm saying this with full sincerity, Perth bias out the window, could we get someone like Adam Taggart to replicate Hussein's impact on that game and really give that dagger blow as an attacking force to the Japanese defense, purely with the fact that he has a lot of instincts and experience. Now, he might not be the quickest pair of legs, but I mean, I'm an Hussein, by comparison, he has a pretty aged number as well. I believe he's 28 or 29, so a similar enough age to Taggart. The one thing I'd also say about this, and I'm not going to lie, this is mostly a vibes-based analysis, kind of the name of the game when it comes to me, but all that stuff that's been going on in England, Crystal Palace 130 years, Newcastle over 90, Spurs, 16 years before they were delivered a title. Could I dare just say that on a vibes-based analysis alone, in Western Australia of all places, that 16-year streak actually just deserves to be broken? Because I'm looking at it and thinking, of all the times to beat Japan, knowing the points gap and the goal difference gap that we have to Saudi, is this just it? Because I'm pretty sure this is it.
Pretty sure this is it. You know what? In terms of looking for comparisons to Japan and finding a blueprint, this is more vibes-based analysis. It's not too technical. But I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Popovic puts up a little clip of the under-20s really taking it to Japan in the semi-final of the under-20 Asian Cup just a few months ago. See a men's football team of Australia take it to Japan like that and seriously play better football. Again, off the vibes alone has to be a burst of encouragement as well. So, look, it's all painting up to be a very exciting game, isn't it?
I think on a system-based analysis, where I'm talking about the centre forward being at the cog of, the Iraqi team that beat Japan, you've actually got a similar dynamic where it'll be dependent on a lot of that play through wider areas. Yeah. So it'd be more about who they're appointing, who the wingers kind of are, and especially, with inverted wingers as well. I mean, the system kind of lines up enough to the point where I'd think that's probably a system Tony Popovich can back a lot more. So I think the comparisons with the 20s and how to exploit a Japanese, curriculum system is not even that poor of a shout, to be honest. It's far more reliable than Adam Taggart running his guts out at his home turf. Something that I still believe, because I just have this conversation about, in 74, it was Jimmy Mackay, in 06, it was Aloisi, in 18, it was Jedinak. Who is going to be the person to step up? Because it happens. The game is at the tilt of one individual, whether we like it or not. We always remember the goal. We always remember the tackle. So who is it going to be? And someone's going to have to put their name up to do it. So I'm just eagerly awaiting the tactical setup that's employed by Popovich. Who does the moment align itself to?
Very good. All right, we'll leave it on that note. Matt, Jacob, thank you for your time today. If you enjoyed this video, go check out our review of the Socceroos squad that Tony Popovich has selected for these games against Japan and Saudi Arabia. It's going to be a very interesting 2 weeks. Enjoy the football.
次は解説です。これがオーストラリア英語なのか、ちょっと疑問ですが、少なくともこの3人は話すスピードがとても速く、すべてを聞き取り、理解するのは難易度はかなり高いのではないでしょうか。ボキャブラリーもかなり難易度の高いものが多く、これまで解説したことのないものも多かったので、早速本日の解説をチェックしてみましょ
う。Yeah, I think the biggest overarching element here is
オーバーアーチは日常会話ではあまり頻繁に使われませんが、抽象的な内容や文章に深みを持たせたいときに効果的な単語です。基本的にはアーチのように上にかぶさるというイメージがベースになっていますが、そこから転じて全体を覆っている概念や広く一貫して存在するテーマという意味でも使われます。例えば、オーバーアーチテーマで全体を貫くテーマという表現になり、文学、ビジネス、学問など様々な分野でよく見られます。知的な印象を与える言葉なので、アカデミックなエッセイや公式なプレゼンなどでも活用できます。
Yeah, I think the biggest overarching element here is I think the biggest overarching element here is you get exempt from military service in South Korea.
イグゼンプトはビジネスや法的な文脈でよく使われる言葉です。例えば、税金や義務、手続きなどに関して何かが免除される、何かの対象外になると言いたいときに使われます。トイックやニュース記事などでもよく見かける単語で、特定の条件やルールの例外について説明する際に非常に便利です。覚えておくと、契約書やガイドラインなどもより正確に理解できます。
You get exempt from military service in South Korea. You get exempt from military service in South Korea. It's because you have that military style and the camaraderie.
キャマラーダリーは友達同士の友情とは少し異なり、チーム、職場、部活動、軍隊など、共通の目的や経験を持つ人たちの間で生まれる深い信頼関係を指します。例えば、過酷なプロジェクトを乗り越えた仲間との間に生まれる絆や、毎日一緒に訓練しているチームメイトとの間にある連帯感がこれにあたります。発音は、キャマラーダリーと少し難しいですが、フォーマルな場面でも使える語で、英検準1級やトーフルにもよく出る単語です。
It's because you have that military style and the camaraderie. It's because you have that military style and the camaraderie. But we're not talking about a spring chicken.
スプリングチキンはユーモラスで親しみやすい表現ですが、使い方には注意が必要です。多くの場合、not a スプリングチキンという否定形で使われ、若くないと言いたい場合や、年を取っているという意味を和らげて伝える言い回しです。ただし、人によっては年齢に関する話題を敏感に受け取ることがあるので、使う相手や場面には注意しましょう。カジュアルな会話で使うと、英語らしい自然な表現になります。
Oh, we're not talking about a spring chicken. We're not talking about a spring chicken who's not been able to crack it into the national team.
クラックイントゥは文脈次第で物理的動作にも比喩表現にもなります。料理の文脈では、卵を割って入れるなどが代表的な使い方で、初心者向けレシピ動画で品質します。一方、比喩的には、ランキングに食い込むや、業界に参入するなど、成果や突破を表すときにも使われます。注意点としては、目的語、何をクラックするかと、 どこへ入れるのかが明確である必要があります。英語ネイティブがよく使うカジュアルな表現なので、場面に応じた使い分けを覚えると自然な会話に役立ちます。
Has not been able to crack it into the national team. Has not been able to crack it into the national team.
What they did was just absolutely strangle any opportunities that.
ストラングルは物理的な意味と比喩的な意味の両方で使われる非常にパワフルな動詞です。直訳すると首を絞めるですが、実際には自由や感情、成長などを押さえつけるという場面での比喩表現としてもよく登場します。例えば、官僚主義がイノベーションをストラングルするというと、発展を窒息させる、つまり阻害するという意味になります。感情を表すときにも、恐怖にストラングルされたなど、言葉や行動ができなくなる様子を表すのにも使われます。文章や演説に強い印象を与えたいときに効果的な語彙です。
What they did was just absolutely strangle any opportunities that. What they did was just absolutely strangle any opportunities that will still be pervasive in this fixture.
パーベーシブは、ある現象や感情、思想などが全体に行き渡っている、浸透していることを表す語で、文章やスピーチで使うと知的で説得力のある印象を与えられます。特に、社会問題、文化の影響、経済格差など、広範囲に影響を与える現象を表現する際にとても便利です。パーベーシブレシズムで根強い人種差別、パーベーシブアンザイティで広がる不安のように、抽象的なテーマとも相性が良い語彙です。全体に進み広がると覚えるとイメージしやすいです。
Will still be pervasive in this fixture. Will still be pervasive in this fixture.
And really give that dagger blow.
ダガーブロは、日常英会話ではやや文学的またはドラマチックな表現ですが、スポーツ実況やニュース、スピーチなどでよく見られる印象的な言葉です。例えば、最後の失点や致命的な失敗を短い剣のような一撃に例えることで、感情的なインパクトを強調します。また、人間関係における裏切りや突然の知らせにも使われることがあります。英語圏のメディアでは、文章を印象づけるための表現として重宝されるので、覚えておくと読解力や表現力がアップします。
And really give that dagger blow. And really give that dagger blow. The game is at the tilt of one individual.
アットザティルトオブという表現は日常英会話ではあまり登場しませんが、文学やナレーション、詩的な文体で使われる印象的な言い回しです。ティルトという単語は物理的な動きだけでなく、心の動きや変化、時間の流れを暗示するためにも使われます。例えば、首をかしげる動作など、相手のちょっとした仕草に意味を込める表現であり、その傾きによって何かが起こる、感じられるといったニュアンスが含まれます。このような繊細な表現を理解できるようになると、物語や詩、映画のセリフなどの英語表現が一層楽しめるようになります。
The game is at the tilt of one individual. The game is at the tilt of one individual.
いかがでしたか？オーストラリアの立場からすると、この2試合がワールドカップに出場するための最後の勝負どころであるため、もちろん本気である以外何者でもないですが、日本がすでに消化試合のように大幅にメンバーを変えてきていることに、層の厚さに驚き、笑ってしまうほどで、それでも怒りというものはあるはずもなく、勝てるチャンスが高くなったということで喜んでいるのは間違いないでしょう。それでも高いレベルであることも十分に分かっているので、ただただ日本の層の厚さに驚いているというところではないでしょうか。実際には、このメンバーにでも勝てないことが分かると、その時の絶望感はさらに大きくなってしまう気がしますが、どのような結果になるのか、どのような展開になるのか、ただただ楽しみたいと思います。本日もご視聴いただきありがとうございました。またすぐにお会いしましょう。